right. Now, let me speak on something else that happened in like the last 30 days that I wish I could have addressed, that I wasn't able to address. And again, for anybody that's watching this initially, I'm this is I think day 16 or day 17 of the occupation outside of City Hall. If you don't know about occupations, Google occupations, Google the Occupy movements, and get informed on that. But that's where we've been at. That's where I'm at. The police come through here at night. Sometimes people come through here at night looking for food. We give people food when they need something to eat. Sometimes people need blankets, unhoused people. We give them blankets, hand warmers and stuff like that. So that's the reason that I'm up. I try to explain that in the video so that way if somebody watching this and don't know the reason that I'm just walking around in the middle of the night like this, they can try to understand it from that standpoint. But anyways, I'm gonna do a bunch of different videos speaking of things that happened since my Facebook page was suspended like 30 days ago. So one of the things that happened too that I noticed was and this is something that I think is important to speak about. I'm gonna try to use some of these live videos while we out here to speak to people who maybe can't come out or who not able to come out or who done been maybe tied up with things that's preventing them from coming out. And try to have maybe conversations that we haven't here with them on the other side of this screen. So I want to speak on the importance of the crosswalk, like the actual crosswalk at City Market, the initial one that people was getting arrested at. I want to state this too before I even start speaking on it. I do not think that property is more important than people. I do not think that symbols are more important than people. I don't think that proving a point or anything, nothing is more important than people. Unfortunately, we live in a society where sometimes people don't care about things that happen to people until it affects property or until it's a symbol that represents the thing or until some kind of economic impact takes place. And then they start caring about people. So it becomes necessary to have things that are symbols, it was never worth sitting at a lunch counter for people to get bit up by dogs and get sprayed by fire hoses and sit in jail. That's not what sitting at a lunch counter is worth. But unfortunately, it was people in a society who needed to see people be brutalized and needed to see these symbols of these symbols of oppression and these symbols of exploitation here. Doing the rounds. They needed to see these symbols of exploitation for them to care about fixing these issues and allow people to sit at lunch counters and allow people to have equal, try to get somewhat equal education and allow people to have somewhat of equal housing, right? So they needed these things for them to feel inclined to do it. So that brings me to the crosswalk. The disruption that we caused by walking in the crosswalk, by legally walking in the crosswalk, by continuously walking in the crosswalk, which we were completely in our rights to do. That disruption highlighted multiple things about the police department. It highlighted the lack of restraint that they have. It highlighted the hypocrisy that they have. It highlighted the excessive force and the impunity that they are allowed to operate with. All of those things got highlighted simply by walking on this crosswalk, right? So then that makes the crosswalk sort of become a symbol and become bigger than just any old crosswalk. And nobody does that individually. That's something that happens collectively. That happened on July 31st, the moment that they victimized people and brutalized people and persecuted people on this crosswalk. They made the crosswalk something bigger than just a crosswalk, right? But at the same time, it still is important to remember that it is just a crosswalk. Both of those things, it's an irony. It's a give and take that happens where it's like, it's just a crosswalk, right? So they shouldn't be persecuting and oppressing people and brutalizing people and doing this much to people over just a crosswalk. But then at the same time, it's more than just a crosswalk. It's bigger than a crosswalk. And so that is why they, doing these things to people. Because walking in that crosswalk and disrupting traffic became an exercise in freedoms and an exercise in rights that the police department not used to people in this city exercising to that extent. It's cities in this country that if the worst thing that was going on, protest-wise or demonstration-wise or anything like that, if the worst thing that was going on was people walking in the crosswalk, they would love that. If the worst thing going on in Portland was people walking in the crosswalk, they'd be all for that. In Seattle, in Chicago, in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, in Oakland, in some of these places where it's bigger groups of people and people that maybe had like generations before them that already been organized and in a different manner, so they already maybe a couple steps ahead when stuff like this start to happen. If places like that only had to deal with people walking in the crosswalk, man, wouldn't nobody be getting arrested, be sitting in jail overnight, and be getting persecuted to this extent and having felonies charged against them. And so I sort of got off subject with that, but I want to get back to the point of, so one of the things that happened is, I think that some people have seen posts that I made, or maybe even heard things that I said, or maybe not even just me, but, just collective, maybe heard a collective thought process that included this idea that the crosswalk was more important than people who maybe got brutalized at the crosswalk, which is not. The crosswalk ain't worth Jordan still being in jail, right? The crosswalk not worth nobody who got arrested. I don't want to say people's names if they don't want their names, put out there, but the crosswalk not worth nobody who's been arrested. The crosswalk not worth nobody who done been followed home or had pictures taken of them, or the crosswalk not worth nobody who done had no kind of like nightmares, or nobody who done been like mentally traumatized. The crosswalk not worth that, But on the last city market, it was important that since for so many weeks we have been denied access to this crosswalk, right? For so many weeks we have been assaulted while trying to be on this crosswalk, right? For so many weeks we have been persecuted while trying to be on this crosswalk, right? For so many weeks people had sat in jail over weekends for just trying to walk on this crosswalk. It became a symbol that at the very last city market we could walk on that crosswalk again, right? For like 2 or 3 weeks, for at least 3 weeks, we have been pushed from crosswalk further and further down, And so to get back to the initial crosswalk, to walk on that crosswalk unimpeded by police officers by the time the night was over with, went to prove to the point that it was never a hazard for us to walk in this crosswalk. It was never illegal for us to walk in this crosswalk, and that the police department never needed to be out there to try to police us walking in the crosswalk because it wasn't that big of an issue. If it was, at the very last one, when we still had a bunch of people, more people than we had out there the first time they arrested people, and when people was regularly walking in the crosswalk, they would have arrested people for walking on that crosswalk, but they didn't. Right? So it's important too to also think about things in a history context. Right? And in the context of history, it's important that the same way the protest began, it ended that way. And then this is just me saying opinions and thoughts, all right? Like, all things was organized on a collective manner. It's nothing that's done from a hierarchy standpoint or from a standpoint of somebody being in charge or somebody being a leader or nothing like that, right? So I'm just talking about what, looking back, was the process and what I think was the pros and the cons, and what I feel like some of the perception may have been for people, and right. And so, like I'm saying, like, it's none of those things is worth walking on the crosswalk, but it's important in history and in the story and in telling the things that the very first thing that we did the first time we went to City Market to protest, walking on the crosswalk, just by disrupting traffic, having megaphones, talking about what happened on May 30th. That was the same thing that we did the very last time we did a protest at City Market. It was walking on the crosswalk with megaphones, talking about what went on May 30th. And so that the next, whether it's next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, no matter what it is from now, and whenever what this movement is and this specific struggle is, whenever it maybe dies down or transforms into something else, when that new thing starts, that new thing can look back and know the importance of being unyielding, right? Of being immovable, right? Of being uncompromising. And it's a lot of people who don't understand the complexities to what went on at City Market, that have preconceived notions and judgments on it based off of them not being knowledgeable about what protests and demonstrations are in general. It's a lot of people who they don't feel like it's a priority for them to be informed about a subject, but they always want to speak about a subject, which is a dangerous thing. You know, and this is separate from speaking about just the crosswalk, but and so again, I think that it's important that people understand the crosswalk and again, some people don't agree with the tactic of the crosswalk. There's some people who think that was too excessive, right? And it's people who think that that's not excessive enough. And again, I say all of those things just to say, I never thought that, and I don't think anybody has ever felt that the crosswalk was worth any of the things that happened to people on the crosswalk. But the symbol of what that crosswalk is in the city of Rockford, because of each sacrifice that anybody made, that each person made collectively, the sacrifice each person made collectively has made it a symbol. And symbols, are made because of the sum of their parts, All right, I'm gonna end it.